Today's guest is a legend of swimming in the Michigan area, Jim Richardson. I said that correctly, I believe. Did I?
Yes.
Jim, I'm just going to go through your accolades here. Man, it was pretty impressive. I Googled you. I met you before. However, I didn't know your background. I knew that you're up lecturing up at the University of Michigan, but man, 27 years with the swim program there, the swimming and diving program, and 12 consecutive titles. This is their Big Ten titles.
Yes.
Wow. And then you took the team to a third place and to a second place, as well as you were named Coach of the Year twice, not just once, but twice, and a six-time Big Ten Swimming Coach of the Year as well. Man, welcome to the show. I don't think ever had anybody on this show of that stature. It's pretty cool.
I
Mhm.
don't consider myself of that stature, Sean. I just have some great kids to work with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, they're the ones that make you great, I guess, right?
Right.
I have a huge affinity for the sports down in the United States. My dad was a wrestler in at Oklahoma State.
Mm.
He was an All American there, and he was a three-time Olympian for Canada as well. So he was one of these guys that said, you know what, I got to find great competition to make myself better. And he knew up here in Canada there wasn't much competition because we had much smaller population in the wrestling. But he went over to the United States. He actually hitchhiked down in the United States and got a scholarship. Yeah.
Wow.
So he was driven. So you know what? I absolutely love the programs. I know what you guys are doing down there. I've been a fan of Michigan ever since I went to school down in Michigan. And man, you guys got some really good traditions. You got some good programming. Of course, 27 years with the university, um, and the success you had was pretty cool. And you know what? I came down this summer and I got to see you lecture at the university during one of your swim clinics. And some of the stuff you were talking about blew my mind because I was a coach in well, up here in Canada as well at one of our university, York University. But I was just wondering if you could touch on some of the information that you talk about to some of your student athletes or some of your the athletes at the swim clinics.
Yeah, my background is exercise physiology, biomechanics, but 2006 I got introduced to work by Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford, who's an attribution theorist.
Hmm.
And attribution theory is really the study of uh, to what do people attribute what's happening to them,
Hmm.
self-talk, explanatory style, all those kinds of things, which led me on a journey to begin to dive into um, the psychology of motivation, the psychology of performance, um, just a broad general look at how people think, why they think that way, and what we can do as coaches and teachers to intervene to help people through times where they're not processing things well, they're struggling, or the ones who have a pretty good mindset to help them stay on the right path so that they're going to give themselves the best opportunities for success in whatever endeavors they choose to pursue. So it led me to I took a course in the neurology of behavior taught by Dr. Bob Sapolsky at Stanford. Just a fascinating course about the brain, how it works, why it works that way. Um, so it's been really since about 2006 a continual pursuit of more information on how people operate, why they tend to operate that way, and what you can do to help, as I said before, particularly when people are stuck, or they're in a bad place. I wish I had studied it earlier. I was a high school teacher in the inner city for 9 years. And boy, I had a lot of students who really could have benefited from some of the knowledge I picked up, other than just being, I'm a compassionate person. I'm
Mhm.
amiable and I'm compassionate. And so my natural tendency is when I see people struggling, I want to step in and help.
Mhm.
So yeah, but the last 12, actually, gosh, it's been 16 years now that I've really been on a little more formal journey of trying to understand more about how people operate from a psychological standpoint and behavioral standpoint.
Mhm. You talked about your work with the inner city, and that kind of actually, it touches on what we do here at Engage 416. And that's one of the reasons when I was listening to your lecture, you were talking about mindset and stuff like that, and I've been in these communities and I've seen what's happening. I've probably seen exactly what you experienced too as well. Some of these kids just have these mindsets where they can't get past certain blocks. I think there's strain theory talks about various blocks in these kids' lives, and as a result of not meeting, I guess, the social standards that we put together, they ended up going into the gang lifestyle or never progressing to any of their goals because they feel like, I live in this low income area, I can't get out of it. They don't have any role models either. They're held back because of that. And it's often, I like to say is there's the mindset kind of beats them down. And if we don't have some people, mentors, maybe coaches, to intervene and maybe help them with that mindset. Because I think if you can change somebody's mindset, and I think you're talking about Carol, you said Dweck.
Carol Dweck.
One
Yeah.
of the books that you recommended, you sent me a list of readings. I've only got through two of them so far, but I think that was her first book. No, that was the first book I got through, was the mindset. Very profound you just kind of, when we talk about it here on the Engage 416 live stream sometime, where we're talking about how that equates with some of these kids. And I think, that if we start developing programs similar to, I think you sent me another article, the Perry Preschool Project. Um, if we change mindsets at an early age, people can succeed. And I think you said you weren't able to do that. You didn't learn until later on in life about this empowering individuals, stuff like that. But it went into your coaching career, did it not?
Yes, in the latter stages, as I said before, I've always have the desire to be engaged with my student athletes, not just as an athlete, but as a student, and to help them be forward looking as much as they can about this opportunity is going to set you up for the rest of your life. So yeah, I've been that way always, but not having really the formal education or semi-formal education to back up that caring with, okay, here are resources, these are some things you can do that are research based, that have been implemented and have had degrees of success. So that was really started about 2006, if not a little bit before. Yeah.
And why did you get into that? Like, what was the process?
Um, I worked with, beginning in 2003, 2004, I became frustrated with our dry land training program, our
Okay.
out of water training. So I contacted, through a friend of mine, probably one of the top functional training experts in the world, Vern Gambetta.
Okay.
He travels all over the world, Stanford graduate, very bright, was a decathlete. And I convinced him, to come and consult with us at Michigan. And he's the most voracious reader I know of. He probably reads 2 books a week, and he's really, really bright. And his whole, area of expertise is in human performance. And he suggested Mindset to me to read that book.
Hmm.
So I read it, and that started me on the journey of really taking a deeper look at okay, what's the psychological aspect of performance and behavior and success. um, what does that involve?
So after reading that book, you obviously that information, your head gets full of this information. How do you kind of bring that into the practice setting or into your dry land?
Yeah, well, the book is really about two mindsets that are juxtaposed to one another. One is the talent fixed mindset, and the other is a growth learning mindset. And, I read a lot of additional work by Dweck on the research she did with kids as young as 5 years old, and the research they did to kind of validate her theory about being either talent fixed in your mindset or growth learning.
Hmm.
And she found that the kids who were growth learning oriented were 65% more likely to be resilient in the face of failure,
Hmm.
kids who were talent fixed. It struck me in reading the book because when I was in high school, I was talent fixed.
Hmm.
I knew the things that I did well, and I knew the things that I struggled with. The things that I struggled with, I didn't want to spend any time on because they didn't come easily to me.
Yeah.
And the things that did come more easily to me, those are the things I gravitated towards. So there was an avoidance of things that were difficult, that required more studying, and I recall a conversation I had with my math teacher after my junior year, and I had advanced placement B my junior year in high school, which was calculus and everything that went with it, with introductory calculus. And I never did my homework.
Hmm.
I enjoyed sports so much. I'd just go out after school and we'd be playing, outside of swimming season, we'd be playing pick up football or basketball or baseball in the neighborhood. And I just, I didn't want to sit down and apply myself. And so I went to him after my junior year, and he had to sign off on going to take APA for my senior year. And he looked at me and he said, "Jim, I'm not going to let you do that."
Hmm.
And I said, "What? I'm smart, don't you?" And he said, "You just don't work hard enough. You
Wow.
don't you don't do your homework frequently. You don't work hard enough." Boy, that was a slap in the face. And I wish I had been mature enough then to take that to heart. But
Hmm.
because I was so talent fixed, it was like an insult. What do you mean? I'm smart.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things that I read about in mindset really came home to roost with me.
Hmm.
And but the thing that I learned from it was, okay, in working with young people, some of these young people may not be as talent fixed as I was,
Hmm.
but they may have the idea that things that come easily to me, I should gravitate towards doing those things. And anything that's difficult, I'm not meant to do that.
Hmm.
And so that sent me on a journey to understand, okay, if things are hard to learn, what's the physiological process of learning?
Hmm.
Why is it so hard? So I took Sapolsky's course on the neurology of behavior, and
Hmm.
then I looked at Daniel Coyle's work, which the talent code, and a lot of information like that to help me understand better what happens in the learning process and how to go about it in order to accelerate learning as best you can. I did a lot of research on who wins the National Spelling Bee.
Hmm.
What learning devices do they use in order to become really, really proficient at being able to spell words? Um, so it led me to understand also. I did some more work with Dweck in trying to understand, okay, well, how do kids transition from being talent fixed to growth learning and being more resilient? Well, the basis of that is understanding how I learn,
Hmm.
understanding how we learn and what happens in the brain when we learn. And her research indicates that once you explain to kids what neurons are and what axons are and what myelin is and how the brain changes when you learn and what you have to do to stimulate the brain cells, which are the neurons, in order to create new pathways for learning, how to do that. Kids who understand that process, now they've got an answer of why I'm struggling with this, why it's so difficult for me. Sometimes it's genetic. Sometimes, and we all know this. I mean, if you've got, parents and grandparents who are great musicians, some of those grandchildren are going to become really good musicians because that gift is passed neurologically in the brain, to generations, just like eye color and hair color and, skin color and personality traits. But those types of quote gifts you can't see. They're not external. They're located inside the brain. And unless you've got a brain scan to be able to look at the degree of connectivity in different parts of the brain that are responsible for different things, you don't really know other than, when we're in school in class, we all know who the really smart kids are. I mean,
Mhm.
there's some kids who are kind of smart, but there are some kids who they're really, really smart. And it's usually because they've been given a gift in the brain of having a lot of connectivity for whatever it is they're gifted at. And the ones who are gifted, who work really hard also and study, get out of their way. They're going to be, in athletics, they're going to be the world record holders. In science, they're going to be the people who do major breakthroughs. So, yeah, once I began to dive more deeply into, okay, how to affect this change from talent fix to growth and what kids need to know initially in order to make that transition. They just need to understand, to me, why I am where I am.
Mhm.
Why am I where I am? Why do I struggle with this? Why is this hard for me? And when they have an understanding of how the brain is wired and connected, um, then they go, oh. And they need to understand that, okay, if I practice a lot, rote repetition, doing it the right way, my brain will change.
Mhm.
It will change, and I will gain a lot more connectivity. It's called axon growth and myelination. And when that happens, you become kind of good at something and then better and then better. And then it becomes what we call autonomous. You do it automatically. You don't even have to think. That's when you get stimulus, you respond to that stimulus automatically. Now, if you've been reared a certain way, and you get a certain stimulus and you've been reared a certain way, you're going to respond automatically. And sometimes that's not good. Sometimes it's not good, but it's just how the brain has been wired based in part on your genetics somewhat, but
Mhm.
probably more in terms of behaviors on how you've been reared in the environment you've been living in from the time you were really, really young.
Mhm. And I seem to recall, and I might be mixing up the two books that I've finished on your recommended reading list, but some of the mindsets, are actually implanted by some of the environments, right? The fixed mindset can be planted by just the way parents act, or the way they praise their children.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, I found that very interesting, and I noticed when you were lecturing some parents at these clinics, that you had a message to them too.
Yeah, the whole idea of praise, it's so natural for a parent from the time, a child is born to praise physical attributes, to praise outcome. Um, to praise accomplishments, and they don't praise effort as much. They don't praise attitude as much. They don't praise things that are really malleable and changeable. There was a study done on Olympic swimmers in the United States. One of the questions they asked them was, what do you prefer your parents to say to you? And the answer was, after a race, the answer was, I love to hear them say, I love to watch you swim. That's it. I love to watch you swim.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all they wanted to hear. In coaching, we can, especially in a sport like swimming, because it's time oriented. I mean, it's an objective standard. To qualify for this meet, you have to go this fast. It's not about beating somebody else. It's about competing against the clock. And so whenever somebody achieves a standard that, allows them to go to the next level, everybody gets really, really excited. But we don't spend as much time talking about the process that it took to get there. The determination, the resiliency, overcoming obstacles. When parents let their children know how much they appreciate their effort, how much they appreciate their resiliency, how much they appreciate their compassion for teammates who are struggling, how much they appreciate attributes in their children that can be changed and grown. And the research is pretty clear that when you have those kinds of attributes, you're going to draw people to you, because people want to be around people like that.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens on a team environment, it just creates a very dynamic atmosphere, environment for performance, because you're not distracted by selfishness, and you're not distracted by egos, and you're not distracted by an obsession with product output, as opposed, because that's not really a controllable. You've heard it before, control the controllables. Well, what are the controllables? Well, it's your attitude, it's the effort you're going to put forth, and then it's identifying the things over which you have some control, and then assessing, I'm going to prioritize these, and I'm going to work to improve these things. And that's either psychologically or physiologically, but that's how you get better. I mean, that's how you get better. And if you don't have that kind of a mindset, then you're left to your talent. And sometimes that talent is really great, and you can some people accomplish great things. The sad thing about a lot of those people, if they're just on talent alone and not on work ethic and self-discipline and, caring about their teammates, when they win, nobody else wins. Nobody wins with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who work hard, care about others, create a great team environment. When they win, everybody wins.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wins.
Yeah. And I remember, there was examples in the book. I think John McEnroe was one of them. And he was an example of the fixed mindset. And I think and anybody that knows John McEnroe, of course, I think some of the younger swimmers might not remember or even know him, but he was all fixed mindset, I believe, as she stated. Was that I'm just trying to, the two books, is that Carol's book?
I don't think so. It could be, Top Dog, maybe. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah. I think I'm confusing my homework.
Well, all of these books kind of speak to the same message in their own way. I mean, you speak of John, and I don't mind sharing this with you, and I think Michael would be fine with it. We had Michael Phelps for 4 years at Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And this was before Michael went through rehab, and he was on a rough road. He was on a really rough road. He was a prodigy in swimming, but really had no, intellectual curiosity. He did not enroll at Michigan. He came to train there with his coach because we had a lot of good male swimmers for him to, compete with every day in practice. And his life was, and he's written about it in his autobiography, and talked about it. And his life changed when he went into rehab, and he became a really different person. His persona on the Olympic team, I want to say it was 2016 in Rio was his last Olympics, was 180 degrees from what it was in 2012. And swimmers on the team commented about how different he was. I'll tell you a quick story about him.
Okay.
I did a clinic at the United States Swimming in Colorado Springs for the national junior team, and I was having lunch with former head coach at Michigan, the men's team, and a friend of mine from North Carolina who's been involved with USA Swimming for a long time, being consultants for national teams. So I went into the cafeteria and sat down to have lunch with them, and a table next to me was Michael Phelps and his wife-to-be and another swimmer that I knew really, really well, who we had trained. And so I leaned over, and he had gone through rehab the previous summer. So I leaned over to both of them and I said, did this rehab, has it made a difference? And one of them looked at me and said, Jim, you see the swimmer who's having, lunch with Michael and his girlfriend? I said, yeah. And he said, and her struggles with depression have been well publicized. Well, she's going through depression. He said, Michael is sharing scripture with her. You could have knocked me over. You could have knocked. That was not the Michael Phelps that I knew.
Wow.
And I was so, it made my heart just really feel so good for him. And a completely different path now than he was. And when you see that happen, it just lets you know there's hope. Because this guy was a millionaire at 15. He had everything, he and everything that money could buy, he was involved with, and that's secret from his biography. So, when you see that kind of change, there's hope. There's hope.
And that was his mindset, you believe, right? Just from going to
do the things I'm good at and the things I'm not good at. I'm not going to waste any time on those things.
Yeah.
No growth.
No growth. Yeah. And, I think we're talking, Carol does mention in her book about how that can stall an athlete's performance. And I think that's a great example of what you're talking about. You have that fixed mindset where, I'm not going to try anything else. And, that can, transfer over to real life, right? Like, it doesn't have to be athletics. It can be other things. And I think some of the kids in our neighborhood, like we talked about earlier, that's the mindset they have. And sometimes they have to have an awakening, whether it's through a coach, a mentor, or just experiencing it themselves. And part of the reason why we do this podcast is hopefully we can catch the attention of one of these kids and just change their life, change the trajectory of their life. The support of parents is huge. And when we're talking about the right praise and the wrong praise, you talk about, just the encouraging part, the effort, encouraging the effort and not focusing on the results is so, I think that's a huge change for a lot of parents. How do you encourage that within your coaching position?
Well, when I talk to parents, I ask them to kind of self-check on how do you praise your child and what do you praise them for? Are you praising them for something that can be changed, or are you praising them for something they've already done or they did? And it starts at a young age. You're so cute. You have such pretty eyes. You have pretty hair. Oh, you're so strong. You're this, you're that. And what you're doing is you're praising genes. You're just praising their genetic makeup. You're not praising any what we call attribute. You know, your ability to be compassionate, your ability to be responsible, your ability to do the right thing, your ability to tell the truth. Um, you know, those are all attributes that are, they've been proven statistically through research to be key elements to success in life. The research that you saw that was really about the importance of EQ as opposed to IQ, and starting with that at a very young age. I'll tell you a quick story. My youngest granddaughter,
Mhm.
um, she came out of the womb energetic and full of life. And as soon as she learned to walk, she had an older brother and an older sister. She used to grab their favorite toy. She had her own room, and she would run into her room and lock the door and throw the toy under the bed. And of course the brother or sister would come running after and pound on the door and be yelling, "She took my and so I shared an article with my daughter, called No More Timeouts. And it's kind of using cognitive behavioral therapy with with your child. And instead of sitting them in a corner in a chair, which she did from times, I had to, especially a lot with this one, let her sit there and think about it. Well, what's she going to think about? She's going to think about what she not the implications of it. Just,
Mhm.
I did this and it made them angry and that was fun. But when she began to do, sit down with her, and it takes time. I get that. You got 3 kids, and you've got to sit down with them and take time to do that. And she just would ask her, the simple questions. Well, how did that make, your brother feel when you did that? I mean, and is that going to make him want to care about you more? Just not yes or no questions, but more getting her to open up about her feelings and the feelings of other people.
Mhm.
And she sent me this picture one morning, and this youngest daughter she's the first one up in the morning. I mean, like a bundle of energy.
Mhm.
Everybody else still asleep. And my daughter had their lunch boxes on the island counter, with the food in them and everything. And she got up early, and she put some extra things in each of their lunch boxes. And then in the lunch boxes for the 2 older ones, she just stuck a note in there with their name saying, "I love you. I love." She changed that pattern of behavior just by, and she is the most loving child now. She and her older brother is 16, and I think she's 12 now. And they have this cute back and forth with one another. And she and her sister, we take them out to lunch and they share stuff and talk all the time. And they just have the best relationship. But boy, if she had just let her continue on that track, I don't think they would be where they are today. So intervention at that young age in terms of just, having conversations. What are you
Mhm.
feeling when you do that? And it takes time. People are busy. Parents are busy. You have multiple children, taking the time to do that is hard, but the outcome down the road is going to be even harder if you don't.
Yeah, it's a huge investment in your kid. I mean, I think as you're talking, parents just want the behavior to end. They want to get it done with,
Right.
and that can be, like you said, detrimental if you don't explain why the behavior is wrong, why the behavior or how the behavior affects other people. And in the long run, you're investing in your kid's future. You want your child to grow up to be a respected person in society. You don't want them to be that bully. I mean, no parent wants to, get the teacher to call home and say, "Hey, your kid is bullying my kid." Well, I think, when we talk about bullies, I think that's where it kind of starts at home. If you don't implement the value system at home, if you don't change behavior at home, and not through discipline, but through interacting with them, giving them the attention they need, and then explaining why. And it's similar to what you're talking about, with the change in your swimmers, explaining them why things are occurring in their brain, and but on a different level especially with the young kids, why the behavior is happening. There becomes a better solution. Instead of I can't do that, you can't do it. Why can't I do that? It's like you said, it's an easy out for the parents, and it's a lot of work to do the other thing. And we always shy away from a lot of work because again, the mindset that you spoke about is, what, that's too hard. I don't want to do it. So it kind of transfers into the whole theme of what we're talking about already. Man, and then to go into the segue of the article that you talked about, developing children is so important. You sent me an article on, I don't think it was particularly on the Perry preschool project, but it mentions it. It was a project that happened in Ypsilanti, and it was a carryover from something like that. Maybe you could tell the viewers a little bit about that, because it was pretty interesting, and it relates to what I do up here in Canada in some of these marginalized neighborhoods.
Well, the crux of the study was when they did a longitudinal study that started in kindergarten, and they did intervention. Well, they kind of took an assessment of where kids were in kindergarten with respect to emotional quotient capabilities. They're sharing, being compassionate, talking, etc. And they scored them, at in kindergarten years in terms of who seemed to be more engaged, more compassionate, who shared more, who had better, we call it executive functions. They had the ability to kind of choose between right and wrong and make the right decision at a very young age. And then they tracked them longitudinally up into their 20s. And they found that the kids who had a higher, well, let's just call it an EQ, even in kindergarten, higher GPAs in high school, all through school, less problems with the law, less discipline problems, more successful in their early 20s in whatever they chose to do. So it kind of emphasizes, and this is a longitudinal study. It's not cross-sectional. So you're tracking the same people from the time they're 5 years old until their 20s, and you're just looking at, what's happened in their lives, and that correlation between those kids having those kinds of attributes at a very young age, which some of it, yeah, genetic, but some of it certainly how they were, the kind of home they were reared in, because there was really no formal education up until kindergarten for some of these kids, pre-kindergarten maybe, but it just shows that really strong correlation between doing this at a young age, getting started on it when they're young, and then by the time they're in their 20s, you see these outcomes that are just statistically far superior to the kids who did not have those kind of skills when they were 5, when they were 6. So, intervening, the intervention word is kind of, we tend to think of it as intervention for drug problems and the like, but you're really intervening with them from the time they come home, and you have to make a decision. What are my conversations going to be like? Do they need to know that they're loved? Do they need to know that they are loved? Because that's, everybody on this planet needs to love and wants to be loved. And there are, numerous studies that have been done on children that, have been put into orphanages, and they cry and they cry and they cry. And after a while, they stop crying. They stop crying. And the brain changes. The brain changes. And that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because for some of these kids, they're not going to be able to overcome that. you've got a good window until they're about 9 or 10, a really good window. But after 10, it's harder. It's harder. And with teenagers, it's really hard because peer pressure really comes into play there. And that's depending on the environment, that they're in, that is a really, really tough thing to overcome. But even in that age span, they still want desperately to be loved and cared about. And even the ones who are, 5 or 6 kids in the home, and there's the grandmother taking care of them because the mother's here and there. There's no positive male role model in the family. Gosh, those kids have a tough road ahead of them. It's really tough.
Yeah, as you were talking there before you started mentioning that scenario there, I mean, I'm thinking along the lines of the kids that I've dealt with in the neighborhoods that I've worked in, and how that study kind of equates. There's no love in some of these homes because the parent is either there's one parental unit there, and that parental unit is working. There's nobody to really love them at home, so they go out the streets and they get the attention at the streets. And then they become this hardened individual because they've never felt love at all. And then the minute somebody, a teacher, a coach, a police officer shows them any attention, it's pushed away because and it's harder to get through because they've built that exterior shell because they don't trust anybody. They don't believe that love exists in some of their worlds, right? And it's frustrating, and I think the path that it goes down can be fatal sometimes, especially with these kids.
It's if not acutely fatal, chronically fatal.
Yes.
I saw it in a lot of the girls.
Mm-hmm.
They never experienced a healthy love relationship from a male parent.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they 12 years old, they start seeking attention and what they think is love. I had 15-year-old boys who would be in my classes and they would pull out their wallets and show me pictures of the babies they had fathered at 15.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just heartbreaking because those girls who fell victim to that got caught in that spiral
Mm-hmm.
and trying to get out of that when she had a baby and she had a baby and I've got and it's every now and then you'd have a grandma come to PTA night,
Mm-hmm.
come into your class and tell you the first thing you see wrong with my child, Mr. Richardson, either in your class, please give me a call. Here's my phone number.
Mm-hmm.
Give me a call. And you felt like those kids had a chance. Those kids had a chance.
Mm-hmm.
I had a girl in one of my classes, and she was always well kept. She lived in the projects. And she had been absent for 2 days. And on the third day, I asked one of the girls in the class, where is she? Do you know what's going on? Is she sick? And one of the girls said, Miss Richardson, she got shot. Said she got shot. Is she okay? Yeah, she's in the hospital. What happened? Well, she was doing dishes in her, apartment up in the project, and somebody shot her through the screen door. Why would somebody do that? And the girl looked at me honestly and said, she's just too white, Mr. Richardson. She's just too white.
Mm-hmm.
And so it tells you how the peer pressure there, and I'm sure it had something to do with a boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't apply, but it just shows you how profoundly deep that peer pressure is there to conform.
Mm-hmm.
Conform to the environment, to conform to the ethos of that environment. And that's why it's so difficult. I talked to my wife several times. We need to adopt some of these kids, but we had 3 of our own at the time. And I wasn't making much money, but I did a lot of after schools. You do the stuff I think 90% of the teachers out there try to do to make a difference. But gosh, those environments, as you know, I mean, you work in those environments. It is, but when you get a success, boy, you have to celebrate.
Oh yeah.
You don't have a lot of them, and you have to,
Oh, there's my dog again. For those of you that are listening, we have a dog just next to the studio, so I guess he's a little upset, but he was upset a little earlier, but he calmed down. So hopefully,
That's okay. I like dogs.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah, so you talk about celebrating success, and I think it is. Some people get discouraged because they can't help as much, but sometimes it's just that one person and affecting that one person's life and making them and showing them the way, inspiring them to get it while facing adversity. Like they face this adversity of living in a community or living with some sort of malevolent activity happening in their, maybe they experience this shootings every day in the neighborhood. Maybe their kid was shot, maybe they're or died of a drug overdose. But helping them out and getting them to a place where their mindset is a little bit better, those are the victories that should be celebrated, because I don't think we can help everybody as much as we want to.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that one is kind of like that story of the exceedingly low tide, and this guy comes across a guy. All these starfish have been exposed, and there are thousands of them, and he's walking down the beach tossing starfish back into the water so that they can live. And a guy comes up to him and says, "Look, there are thousands of them here. Why are you taking the time to do this?" He said, "Well, it mattered to that one.
Mm-hmm.
It mattered to that one."
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the mindset that we have to take, is that, and you never know where the long-term effect of having done that for that one may lead.
Yeah.
Because some of these people come back after they become successful. They come back and they set up programs, and they do things to reach out to help others the way they were helped. And so you don't know, but you know what's right, so you do the right thing.
Yeah. That's exactly. I mean, you don't know the ripple effect, and when it's years later, when you do have an athlete or somebody that you've mentored come back, and they're doing something within your domain or with to help out the community, it's a proud moment for you, because you realize that because you helped that one individual, hey, they're helping out more. So again, that ripple effect is so powerful. I mean, people that think that saving one isn't enough, it can be enough for somebody in that life.
Exactly.
One of the other things I want to talk to you before I let you go, you're held captive here, is people facing adversity, and I know it's a common thing in athletics. You got an athlete that comes against up at a loss, or they have a death in the family. What I was kind of wondering is, as a coach, as a mentor, how do you deal with your athlete facing adversity, getting them to kind of not ignore it, but get through that and focus on, I guess, goals?
Yeah, I think having a what we call a dirt honest discussion about where we are. How did we get here? Why did we, how did we get here? Okay, what are our options from this point forward? What do you think your options are? And having dirt honest discussions along those lines. Being prepared to have resources. I think coaches, and I'm one to some degree, always want to give them all the answers, and sometimes want to do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
But having a list of resources where they can go. We had a tremendous counselor in the athletic department at the University of Michigan, and when kids were struggling with things, I had two people there I knew. I want you to make a phone call right now and set up an appointment
Mm-hmm.
and get them started with somebody who could really help them talk through and figure out strategies. I was pretty good at analyzing physiologically, why are we where we are? Somebody breaks their ankle, okay, and they come in, and it's, thank goodness it's early season. So you have to alter the training. You have to take care of the things you can take care of and let the other thing, the healing, take place. We'd get kids who get mono in December. I had a world-class swimmer who got mono in December, and it was bad.
Yeah.
And we had to qualify for the national championships in February, and then swim in March. But I have a lot of, my background is exercise science and periodization, and I keep records. I've copied every workout, is then stored in my computer, and I have 2 or 3 people that are exercise physiologists, as well as some MDs that I can get on the phone with and go to them and say, if you were in this position, well, Jim, monitor this, have their titer looked at, this frequently, etc. So you know where they are in the healing process, and then adjust your training accordingly. And this particular swimmer swam lifetime bests, after mono, a month and a half of training after that, and then did even faster at NC2As. But that, if I didn't have those resources, when you're in coaching or teaching, parenting, find some go-to people who really they know what they're doing. And just get to know them, and the ones who are great people, they'll respond. I mean, I was afraid to call Vern Gambetta. Boy, he responded immediately. I've corresponded with Dr. Angela Duckworth, who wrote Grit, at University of Pennsylvania, and she's in Martin Seligman's institute there on positive psychology. And and I've benefited from so many of these people's abilities and their willingness to help and share with you. And, well, I had this and I did this and it worked out well. You might want to think about this, and I think as coaches, and particularly as athletes, a lot of times we feel like we've got to do it ourselves, that asking for help somehow is a sign of weakness. And you can't know everything about everything. Nobody can. So when you get into those situations, having a group of go-to people that you can will give you the best information that they can, and these people are all givers. They're not takers, they're givers. They want to help others, and so that's been the plus for me, is figuring out, and I didn't have to figure it out all by myself. I've been on the phone twice this week with one coach emailing me about what we're building. We've built this certification program for U.S. swimming coaches, but he wants to know more about, and he's brighter than I am, wants to know any of my resources for prepubertal exercise physiology training of kids. And I have 3 people that here touch base with these people. They know more than I do. And so having, when you run up against an obstacle, having people, and if you don't, go on Google or call people that might know, and you'd be shocked at how willing these people are to take time to share with you. And you're not alone.
Yeah. And I think that's that growth mindset that we talked about in the beginning is, and if you set your own limitations when you have that fixed mindset, you don't want to help, you have the problem, and you like you talked about when you were younger, you were saying, okay, I don't even want to try that because I'm not good at that. but you know what? You've opened your mindset, and that's all about growth and continuing on. And that's by reaching out to people you're growing. Man, Jim, it has been great talking to you. I want to thank you for your time. Uh, and you know, and I want to thank you for sending me all the books, the homework, ever as well. I will be up in Michigan in a couple of weeks, so I hope to maybe say hello. But again, I want to thank you for coming on. What a fantastic podcast, and I'm sure some of our guests are going to have a few takeaways. One of the things I do is I do recommend reading on my podcast, and I put up some of your books as well. So I know that some of the viewers that are viewing these podcasts are actually reading some of the books you recommended. So thank you so much.
Well, I was going to tell you, if they don't want to read, just go to YouTube and type in the author's name, and they do presentations. So if a lot of TED Talks and things like that, and you can just, save it and play it later. And when you're driving, use that time as time to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, and tell you the truth, I was just watching one of not watching it, but listening to it in the car as I drove this morning.
Mm-hmm.
So they accompany the reading as well. But like you said, if you can't read, those are the things. And what I will do is I will recommend that I'll put that up those links on my social media accounts, and I'll say recommended reading by Jim. So
There you go.
You'll get the credit. Thank you again.
You're welcome, Sean. Looking forward to seeing you.